Calendars out. February 17th, February 18th, live trading, San Diego. We got the Lowe's Coronado. I mean, what else would you want? This event is limited to 50 people. Look at your calendar, clear it, make sure you show up. If you want to be a rebel, this is the place to be. You got to sign up for it now. Giddy up, baby.
No snap, no nothing.
Boom.
Bang, oh, there it is.
I was going to say, Pete's not used to hearing that music playing, Jared. All of a sudden, he's like, oh, what?
Scared the shit out of me.
We're getting a little bit of an echo going here, Pete.
Uh-oh. Hello.
I blame you.
I put it on Jared.
Yeah, whatever's going on, it's not my fault.
Well, I can tell you this, guys. I got about 16 inches of snow outside right now that might be affecting things. I don't know, but it's brutal out there right now. And it took me only a couple hours this morning to try to get through some of it. And it worked out well, but not perfect. So it's going to be a lot more work later on today. Yuck.
And it's real heavy snow too, you were saying, right, Pete?
Oh, it's heavy. It's wet. It's actually, you know what? It's absolutely beautiful. I put up a bunch of stuff on Twitter, some pictures. My wife, of course, decided to take a video of me doing the snow blowing and shoveling today, John. That was pretty classic. I'm telling you, it was halfway up my shin. I mean, holy crap.
I know Jared says it's not his fault, Pete, but something's going on with the reverb.
Oh, jeez. I blame Jared for any and all. No, I'm just kidding, Jared. Sorry about that. Well, John, why don't we jump in, man? Let's do it. Let's do the macro minute and see how she goes.
Well, if we can get if we can get it to stop doing the repeat, Pete, it'll be better. But, well.
All right, John, I'll see what I can do. I'm not hearing what you're hearing, but.
All right. Are you hearing the echo, Pete?
No.
Oh. Well.
I blame Puerto Rico.
Why would it be Puerto Rico?
Well, you're the only one having it. We're all good, me and Jared. He's in the Windy City, and I'm in the snow melt, so.
All right. Well, if the rest of you aren't hearing it, then it's good. Welcome to the Rebel's Edge, folks. I'm John Najarian. He's Pete Najarian. I got it. It's like that, I guess. Pete Najarian. But all right, Jared, let's talk macro minute for a sec, Pete. We've seen a pretty big turnaround in the market. Obviously, we saw a turn yesterday to the downside. Today, we saw the turn to the upside. I know you said the dollar's softer, Pete. Is that your take?
I think that's a little bit of part of it, John. But also, we had that great reaction yesterday. Yesterday, we were down late in the day. We were still down, 200, 300 points. And then we made that big recovery, at least in the Dow, not as much in the NASDAQ. But it's almost as if there's something, and I think what that something is, at least for right now, is as people look ahead to some of the economic numbers that are going to be coming out, they're also looking right at China and what's going on and the reopen and how that's moving. And all you've got to do is look at what some of the bigger performers are, whether it's in the NASDAQ or in the broader markets, and you can see it. It's these China names that are absolutely flying to the upside, and kudos to you yesterday. You had one of those ETFs from China. So, yeah, you deserve a little dance right there. And we might be having a stock involved in that whole thing as well that's a U.S. stock. It's actually really a China stock, but we'll talk about that one later.
All right. Well, let's take a look, Pete, at Geron, G-E-R-N. It was up as much as 50% earlier today. And yeah, I know this looks like a micro cap stock, folks, but it's not. GERN is a multi-billion-dollar stock, And I love the idea right here, Pete, that they've got blood cancers and things like that. They're looking to for a blood cancer drug, and apparently some really good test results coming down, even with the patients that were given the placebo and not the actual drug, supporting that this drug really works.
Yeah, I think it's really impressive, John. As a matter of fact, this name is near and dear to me because, as you know, because I was working with you and for you when I first got to Chicago, and a few years into that whole thing, one of the stocks that I was trading right next to the pit I was trading in was Geron. And I'm looking at that thing. It was at the time, John, I think it was an $11 stock. And they were buying the 12 and a half calls. Well, I decided, you know what? If they're buying, I'm buying. I'm with these guys. And got very, very lucky because that was a Friday, and on Monday morning the stock opened at 90 bucks. So that worked out pretty good for a bunch of 30-cent options at the 12 and a half strike that suddenly were worth, somewhere around that $80 plus range or whatever. So that's not so bad. That was a pretty good trade. Pretty happy about that one. But yes, John, what they're doing now, this is phase 3. So that's obviously very important. We talk about where are they with these drugs? Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Are they going to be able to go commercial? And that's where they're going to next. I mean, this is really impressive what they did against the placebo. And by the way, 98 million shares turning hands in the first couple hours of the day, which normally is a stock that trades about 4 million in a day, in a full day. So in the first 2 hours, 98 million plus, that's a real number. They got a strong balance sheet. This is a company people should keep an eye on because these are the kind of drugs that do have that potential for being $1 billion drug.
Yep. Well, let's jump right into CRM then, Pete. Salesforce. Our friend, Mark Benioff, and I say that because he really is. I mean, you know Mark.
Yep.
Mark has reached out to Pete a number of times, folks, and super guy, very smart. And I think your insights, Pete, into how he built this company as a series of roll-ups, buying another company and so forth. It's really amazing how well he has integrated those. But apparently, he's got to lay a lot of people off right now. 10% of the workforce is what he said.
Yeah, it's a big number, John. And then it goes along with so many other companies that have told us, hey, we got to cut back because during the pandemic, believe it or not, folks, people were hiring. And with that hiring and all the workers at home, but a roll up like what we're seeing out of Salesforce certainly is a little bit of a different number altogether. But you've got Seagate, you've got Meta, you've got Twitter, you've got Amazon all cutting back on some of their employees. That's exactly what they announced today. And that gave them a little bit of a pop. They needed a pop, John. Last year was a terrible year in terms of the stock itself and the performance there. So that's something. But you know what? 3-4% today, 5% even if they got that high, that's not going to make up enough just yet because I think last year, John, they were down around 35-40%, something like that on the year. So that's not so great. But great cash flows for this company. They've got a great balance sheet. They got a lot of things working in their favor. So I think what they've got to do here now is show everybody that they're able to do what they need to do with all these companies that they've brought in with a lot less employees. And that's something that I think we'll see play out over the next 6, 8, maybe 9 months. So the next 3 quarters or so, we'll see how that affects the earnings and some of that profit margin.
Yeah. You and I talked a little bit, Pete, about FOMO, fear of missing out. And it does seem like some of these CEOs basically were afraid that they weren't going to be able to get enough employees. So they were leapfrogging each other to make stupid offers. And now they're basically sold, trying to push them back out the door. All right, Microsoft down 5%, and it was down better than 6 just an hour ago, Pete. Basically, since the start of 2022, last January, it's down 28%. It gets an analyst downgrade to neutral today. It's been a while since Microsoft got a downgrade like this, Pete, but I am tempted, but I am not jumping back in just yet.
I'm right there with you, John. I already own it. I've owned this stock forever, it feels like. As soon as they decided on their New CEO, I was in because that was the right hire. John, I go all the way back when you and I sat on the desk on CNBC and we were sitting there kicking around, and we actually had people on that desk saying, hey, I think they ought to get this guy from Ford. Really? That's the guy? That's who you think was the right guy to run Microsoft? Not a chance. But they stuck with what they did by getting Satya, and that was exactly what they needed. And then the rest is history. $35 stock that just screamed to the upside. And he's been growing that cloud business ever since, but starting to see some slowdown. And that's exactly what this analyst is talking about here. John, the balance sheet is great. The PE value itself is great. But if they are slowing down, that is an issue. I also have a little bit of an issue, and this is the only time I've ever pushed back on Satya Nadella, but Activision Blizzard. I don't know. I think $68 billion seemed like a big chunk. It still hasn't closed. It will in June, supposedly. I'd love to see that somehow break apart, John, and then let them focus on what they need to focus on rather than the $68 billion move for a gaming company. I mean, I just can't quite put that into anything that makes a lot of sense right now. But I've trusted him all the way until now. So for now, I guess I'm riding with him.
Yep. Well, I'm willing to give that guy a whole lot of rope, Pete, because of what he's done in the past. But it's really difficult to watch, just like you say, Microsoft become a gaming company. I know they got Xbox. We all know that, Pete. But anyway, let's jump on to Win, because when you mentioned that we had a Chinese-related play, this is clearly one of those, because Win has massive exposure over to what goes on in China. That's where they make the bulk of their money these days. So it was up 5% today. It's up 10% in the past, I think, 3 trading days, Pete. So that's a pretty nice way to both finish the end of 2022 and begin 2023.
Yeah, Wynn's one of those names, John. We talk about a lot of the casino names because of the exposure to Macau. But Wynn is absolutely, one of those names that is sitting right there. They obviously still have some Vegas numbers, but let's be honest, this is another one of these companies where I think it's 70+% of their revenues, John, is coming from overseas, coming from specifically, let's just say it, Macau. So because of that, with any kind of openings, any kind of positives about that, what's going on in China, that's a positive to them. It's a positive for Las Vegas Sands and a lot of different other names as well that have monster exposure, the Nikes and Starbucks and everybody else. That's going to be a nice shot for them, I think, in the arm. But, I like what we're looking at with Wynn. It's had a really nice recovery. If it opens, John, there's still plenty of room up here. That's why I think this price target that went to 101, that's a $27 boost in the price target. That says a lot about what's really happening and how big Macau really can be for Wynn.
Yep. Well, Pete, let me focus us in for a second on some unusual option activity. So I've got some monster activity, I think, in what's going on right now in the call options of Teva, TEVA. I talked about it yesterday on the 3 at 3 program, which comes on, of course, at 3 p.m. Eastern time. And we saw with the stock trading at $9.30, they were buying upside calls. Today, the stock's $9.89, and they're buying more calls, March 11 calls. They bought 6,500 of those. That's 650,000 share equivalent of those calls. They bought them from about 35 cents, Pete, to about 55 cents. That is a big range, and they just kept buying. I love the way that plays out. I love that they were rolling up from those March 10s that they bought earlier, and that's my unusual activity for today.
I'm going to give you WBD, John, which is Warner Brothers Discovery. Now, it's not a name that we talk about hardly ever, but it was a $32 stock that's now trading $9, right? Or it was trading, I should say, $9. On December 21st, we had a buyer of 66,000 of the January 6th expiring 9.5 calls. They were going for 30 cents. So fairly inexpensive, a nice shot to the upside, a stock that's been absolutely hammered. Those options today are trading $1, John. So they have already more than tripled in their value in a fairly short period of time. December 30th, with stock was still trading around $9.25, $9, somewhere in there. 10,000 of the January 2024 calls were being bought. Those I had less interest in because going out a year doesn't interest me nearly as much. But today, stock trading $9.75. We have 20,000 of the January 10 calls getting bought for, call it, 45 cents. They also sold the downside put. So this is a very aggressive move to get themselves into a bullish play, buying the calls, selling the puts. Forget about the put side of it, folks, especially if you don't have the knowledge in the options world. It makes it much more complicated. But these options for 45 cents have already started to improve, John. Stock went from 9.75 up to 10.50. It's up 10% on the day. Those options have already nearly doubled. So a really nice move already for WBD. I'll tell you what, I don't know how long you want to hold on to this one or how long I want to hold on to this one, but I'll tell you what, it's already on the move, and I think you've already got to start to show a little bit of discipline in this option.
It's all about the discipline, Pete. Pete preaches that all the time, folks. He coined the phrase discipline dictates action, DDA. And clearly that is something that we both agree 100% on. You've got to be disciplined about taking profits and about cutting losses. You got to do both those two things. You can't just do one. All right, Pete, take a look at the sports world right now and tell me what you think about Jim Harbaugh, these rumors that maybe he's going to jump from Michigan to the pros.
Well, John, I've never really liked much about these guys that go from college to the professional level. It hardly ever works, but Jim's a little bit of a different animal, right? Because he started his coaching career his head coaching career, University of San Diego. He did so well there that they brought him up to Stanford, where he absolutely crushed it to the point where he was so good, the San Francisco 49ers said, you know what, we're going to take a shot on this college coach anyway. He's got some NFL experience, not only as a player, but as a coach. He took that team and he absolutely changed everything about the 49ers, John. What I like about Jim Harbaugh is he sticks to who he is. 2 tight ends, a big offensive line, a bunch of running backs, a quarterback that's decent, maybe some decent receivers, but he's going to punch you in the mouth. He's going to run the football, and he's going to make it painful on you. Well, he did that with San Francisco. He did a really great job. He started to slip a little bit, and then he got the University of Michigan job. He's been there ever since, and he has an incredible record, 44-19 with the Niners. But when he was with Michigan, John, 74 wins against 25 losses in 8 years. Not such a bad track record so far. So he gets a call the other day from none other than David Tepper, a guy that you and I both know pretty well in the financial world. David Tepper's the guy who decides to buy the Carolina Panthers, a financial guy, and just writes him a check and says, the hell with it. Here you go. I'll just buy the whole thing. I don't need a bunch of partners. I'll just go in this thing on my own. He's had difficulty with coaches, John. You know why? Because he doesn't know a damn thing about football. But if he decides to get Jim Harbaugh, which, by the way, you've got to go through the Rooney Rule. You've got to go through a lot of different hoops before you can actually hire him within the NFL. But he just had a conversation. It wasn't an interview. He didn't bring him in for anything, but he talked about things. And it sure sounds to me like Jim Harbaugh's got some interest, John, in going down there. What do you think? Do you think if you're Jim Harbaugh, because he's exactly my age, I looked it up, John, he's 1 day younger than me. He was born December 23rd, 63. So what do you think? Is this the right move for Harbaugh now to go back in the NFL, or does he stick with the University of Michigan, where he has had a little bit of struggles only in those big games? But is that the right move? Should he stay at Michigan, or should he take this Carolina job and see if he can turn them into the Niners?
Well, obviously at this stage, Pete, I can't blame Tepper for looking for somebody. I think he was wrong to let go of Ron Rivera, but we all know that ultimately these billionaires, whether they're people that become billionaires like Jerry Jones, who was not a billionaire when he bought the Cowboys, but now is a multi-billionaire from his ownership of the Cowboys. I got to think a lot of these people want to put their own stamp on their team. So do I think Irsay wants to get Harbaugh over with the Colts? Yes. Do I think there might be a bidding war? And if Harbaugh's got a good agent, which I'm sure he does, because he's one of the highest paid college coaches, I think that David Tepper would be wise to try to get a guy like Jim Harbaugh. But it ain't going to be cheap. It's going to be Chucky money, Pete. It's going to be, in other words, your old pal, Chucky from the Bucks. I know you didn't play for him, but I think it's going to be that kind of $100 million deal for Jim to leave the comfort and the success that he's had in Michigan. But hopefully in the next couple days, Pete, we'll be able to report whether or not he stays or whether he goes. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the drafts, Pete, and who's drafting who, shall we?
Well, yeah, let's do it, John. And you and I will just go back and forth on this one. We're only going to do the top 5, but I thought it would be kind of fun to have a mock draft, right? I mean, it's a good time to do that. So I'm going to start it off. And the first pick in the 2023 NFL draft goes to the Houston Texans. And I think it should be C.J. Stroud from Ohio State. They need a quarterback. We've seen what quarterbacks can do to change things. And what I like about this kid is he had 42 touchdowns. He had 6 interceptions this year. The fact that he doesn't throw interceptions. I mean, when you consider how many times this guy put the ball in the air to great people, he has great people around him. Let's never deny that. But this guy is unbelievable, John, about his accuracy. And the fact that he's not turning over the ball tells me that he could be a guy at the NFL level. And I think he really should be the first pick. His size is there, his strength is there, and what he's able to do as a quarterback, I think, really does fit a team that's struggling, much like what you guys have had in Chicago, to be honest with you, and again, Ohio State. But what do you think? Do you like that pick, or do you think it should be somebody else, Bryce Young or somebody else?
I know a lot of people, Pete, are saying Bryce Young, but he is much more of a quarterback, Bryce Young is, with the Heisman and all that. He's much more of he's not as small as Russell Wilson, Pete, but he is significantly smaller than CJ Stroud. There ain't no doubt about that. Both of them are going to go top 5, I think. Top 5, definitely top 8. And it's just a question. Do you want the guy that's 6'3" that can see over the line, or are you willing to take a shot on a guy like Bryce Young, who's much more like a Tua kind of player, isn't he? I mean, but by Pete, until I spoke with you, was basically the Bears, they keep telling me, are going to take a rush edge guy from, whatever team they think ends up having the best opportunity. Will Anderson is the guy that I keep hearing from from Alabama. Yep. He's a great rush, guy. He's 6'4", 6'5", 245 pounds, runs like a deer. But unfortunately, the Bears used to be known for their defense, Pete, but now they've sort of gone away from that. But I don't know that going for a rush edge guy is the guy you should take with the number 2 pick in the draft. I'm a different guy than that, I guess.
Well, the only reason I disagree, John, it doesn't mean I'm right and you're wrong or vice versa, but the only reason I would disagree is this. The Bears have 13 sacks on the season. There are 6 players in the NFL who have more sacks than the entire Bears team. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of, and let me tell you, it gives you an idea of just how bad the defense is right now. So they've got to do something. And I think that they've got some big guys in the middle that are pretty daggone good. But they got to get after the quarterback. That is a very meaningful thing. On a third down, you get a guy who can get around the corner like that. I think Will Anderson's the right guy because of his size. You pointed out, when you look at the guy and you see him on the field, he looks like he's 6'2", 220. That's how he moves. The guy's 6'5", almost, 6'4", 6'5", 250 pounds, and runs like a daggone deer. So I think that he's the right guy, I think, now. And I only want to put him there in that second pick, John, because they got to improve that defense. By improving that defense, it's going to help out the offense. And they just don't get any pressure on the quarterback. We're going to go to number 3 then. Seattle. Seattle needs something. And again, this is a team, John, that offensively and with all their draft picks, because of that great trade, Pete Carroll fleeced those guys in Denver like they've never been fleeced when he got rid of Russell Wilson and then got picks and then he got all the players and all of that. But they need defense. And this is a team that might get into the playoffs, but they still need some defense. They're just not very good on the defensive side, which is not Pete Carroll. So I got Jalen Carter from Georgia. He's big, he's strong, he's athletic, he's everything in a defensive lineman that you want. And sometimes it has to start from the core. And I think the core being right in that middle three. And I think this guy, he's a disruptor. I think he fits in really well. And it's, you know what? It sounds crazy to take an edge rusher and then to get a defensive tackle, but that's part of the NFL. That's what puts pressure on those quarterbacks. And if he can get a push, that makes all the difference in the world. So with that third pick in the NFL draft, I'm going to go Jalen Carter.
Yeah. That would be the guy I wanted for the Bears, Pete. I wish because, we had Hicks and then we lost him. I think you only have so many of these big guys that just block everything up, require a double team, which frees up the linebackers. So it's one of the things the Vikings need. It's one of the things the Bears need. They need somebody big, because if you don't have huge linebackers, if your linebackers are just built to stop the pass and not the run, you got to have somebody big in front of them. And this is one of those guys. And there'll be others, but this one, this guy and the guy they had last year for Georgia, who was on the D-line, is another. So I think both of them have great pedigrees. I'd love to get either of them. And the Bears could have got both.
Yeah.
The Bears could have got the guy last year, Pete, that went to the Eagles, and then they could get this guy. They'd have bookend tackles that could totally jam up the middle of the field. But in their stupidity, the Bears passed on that.
Well, and I would add the Vikings to that too, John, because of the worst defense in the entire NFL, or if they're not the worst, they're somewhere in the bottom three in almost every single category. And they should have not traded down. They should have stayed where they were to get some of these players on the defensive side of the ball. Next up, number 4, pick in the draft, is Arizona. Now, I'm going to go with an offensive tackle, John, this big kid out of Ohio State, Paris Johnson. And the reason I'm going with him is it's tough to figure out which one of the top 3 tackles you should really go with. But the reason I'm going to go with Paris is a lot of people think that he's very, very special. He's got a great athleticism, and he's a guy who likes to kind of push you in the back at the very end of the play, which is something I like. I hated it as a player, as a linebacker, but I love it when I see my guys doing that. And oh, by the way, the quarterback for Arizona, Kyler Murray, he's been sacked over 120 times in 4 years, John. They need to shore up the offensive line. They don't need another receiver. They need another lineman, because too many times he's back there scrambling around and people say, well, all he does is run around. It's because it's a jailbreak. These guys are coming off the ball and they're coming after him, and he's got to start running before he even can get his foot planted on a 3-step drop. It's brutal on their offensive line. That's why I think Paris Johnson's the guy.
Well, he certainly gets high marks, Pete. But we'll have to see exactly, who's available and when they're, what kind of trades happen on top. Because sadly, I think the Bears may trade their pick because they've got a history of doing that, as stupid as it is. Well, sorry about the technical glitch here, folks. I think I got it taken care of. But we certainly appreciate all of you guys tuning in and sticking around for the show. Remember, you can pick us up tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern time for the Rebels Edge. And now that I know what that problem was, we'll get it resolved for tomorrow, Pete. I'll see you tomorrow, everybody.
All right. See ya.